Intercepts and vertices of parabolas. So these notes are set up just like your assignment. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to complete the square to create the vertex form of your quadratic equation. Then you're going to state the vertex. You're going to find the y-intercept, and then you're going to find the x-intercepts. So here's our first equation, y equals x squared plus 14x plus 41. My coefficient of x squared is a 1, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to take the coefficient of x, which is 14. I'm going to divide it by 2, so I'm going to get 7. And then I'm going to square 7 to get 49. So that is the number that I'm going to add to the first two terms and subtract from the last term, so that I have a net gain of 0. So my equation now becomes, if I factor the first three terms, it's going to be a trinomial square, so x plus 7 squared. And 41 minus 49 is negative 8. So my vertex for my first question is negative 7, comma, negative 8. So the opposite of what's with the x value, comma, the number being added or subtracted at the end. So I have my vertex form, I have my vertex. Now I'm going to find my y-intercepts. So if you remember, at your y-intercept, x is 0. So if I want to find my y-intercept, I make x a 0. So I'm going to have y equals 0 plus 7 squared minus 8. And then it's just order of operations. So 0 plus 7 is 7, squared is 49, and 49 minus 8 is 41. So my y-intercept is at 0, 41. For the second part, if I want to find my x-intercepts, I know that y equals 0. So this is one of the reasons that we created the vertex form. So I'm going to plug in y as 0. 0 equals x plus 7 squared minus 8. I'm going to add 8 to both sides because what I want to do first is get my trinomial square by itself. So I'm going to have 8 equals x plus 7 squared. And then to undo a square, you square root both sides. But when you take the square root of something, it ends up being a plus or minus answer. So it's the plus or minus version of the square root of 8. And that equals x plus 7. And that's because if you square a number, it makes it positive, so its original number could have been a negative. So if I have plus or minus the square root of 8 equals x, that looks a little sloppy, let me fix that. Plus or minus the square root of 8, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, and I'm essentially just going to put the 7 in front of the plus or minus the square root of 8. If I happen to know what the square root of 8 was, like it was a whole number, I could actually write it down, but I don't know what it is. So it's plus or minus the square root of 8. So x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 8. So now I have my x-intercept, my y-intercept, and you can just leave it as plus or minus the square root of 8 for the x-intercept, and I have my vertex. Okay, problem number 2. So I have my equation y equals negative 2x squared plus 24x minus 70. My coefficient of x squared is not a 1, which means I need to divide every single term by negative 2. So I have y equals x squared minus 12x plus 35. And now I get to do, oh, I forgot I'm divide by 2, divide by negative 2. Now I'm going to take the coefficient of x, which is negative 12. I'm going to divide it by 2. I'm going to get negative 6, and then I'm going to square negative 6 to get 36. And I'm going to then add that 36 to the first two terms and subtract it from the last term. So if I add 36 here and subtract 36 there, I'm going to get y over negative 2 equals. Now our first two terms should be a trinomial square. Don't forget that number is our key number. So we have x minus 6 squared. And then 35 minus 36 is negative 1. To finish getting this into vertex form, I need to get my y by itself. So I'm going to multiply everything by negative 2. those cancel, and we have y equals -2, parentheses, x minus 6 squared plus 2. So there's my vertex form. This is the very first answer I need. And I can then say what my vertex is. My vertex is 6, 2. So the opposite of the number with x, comma, the number being added or subtracted at the end. So now if I want to find my y-intercept, at my y-intercept, I make x 0. So using my vertex form of my equation, y equals -2 times 0 minus 6 squared plus 2. 0 minus 6 is -6, squared is 36. So if I do 36 times -2, I get -72 plus 2, and that's -70, which means the y-intercept of this equation is at 0, -20. Then, if I take my original equation and find the x-intercept, I'm going to make y equals 0. So 0 equals, I'm going to again use my vertex form, -2 times the absolute value of x minus 6 squared plus 2. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides because my goal right now is to get this trinomial square by itself because I want to just be able to square root both sides. So I'm going to have -2 equals -2 times the absolute value, x minus 6 squared. I'm going to divide both sides by -2. I'm going to have 1 equals x minus 6 squared. And then I'm going to square root both sides. Now the square root of 1 is actually just 1, so that's really nice. So our answer, we have plus or minus 1 equals x minus 6. And if we add 6 to both sides, we can actually get both answers. So here's how we do this. First, let's deal with the plus 1. Plus 1 plus 6 is 7, so 1 plus 6. Then if we do the minus version of that answer, -1 plus 6 is 5. So that means that our x-intercepts are at 5, 0 and 7, 0.